And my dear friends, you've got gourd. You're hurting, hippie. This is Hippie News Network, HNN, episode number 110. Episode 110. Used to be Weedy Weekend, and I'm here for you, bringing you the baked news, not the faked news. Peace and cheers, friends. Love and harmony. I haven't had a news show for 3 weeks. We had a weekend where Pasha was here and sick. We had a weekend where it was a long weekend and I was busy. We also had a weekend of the Hemp Fest in Calgary, the Hemp and Cannabis Expo. So, been real busy and I'm real sorry, but I do have some good stories. I do have some good stories to share, and why don't we start off with just a nice toke. This, my friends, is homemade Baba Kush rosin, really nice rosin. That was only from a couple of grams, really squished beautifully. One of my favorite nighttime strains, but a really good one in the daytime, just to, as long as I've got some sativa to top up the energy, which I do, because I've got a lot to do today. But it's a really good painkiller, and I had a heck of a day yesterday. I'm in a lot of pain. Peace and cheers, friends. Love and harmony. Let's get on with the news. That is a beautiful, beautiful flavor. Oh, I just love that. Now, let's get busy, and as usual, we start in Canada. Because why is Canada so important? Canada is going to be one of the first Western power to fully legalize cannabis. Now, a lot of people will say this isn't legalization. I know that the Emerys, the pot prince and princess of Canada, which I don't fully agree with them, but I love them. I love their commitment. I'm just not on the same wavelength. I'm near. We're close. But they say this is just further regulating, not legalizing. And yeah, we could sit and talk about semantics as to whether it's legal or not. But I'll put it this way. Already, many of the things that I did as a young teenager that could and 2 times did end me up in a jail cell, I got off on those charges, now are completely legal. I just sat on my front step having a toke. A cop drove by. I waved. I didn't hide it. He didn't look twice. Maybe he didn't even notice, but I wasn't scared. I would have gone running if I was 16, 17, but I would have never smoked it on my front step. So, that said, we're off the opinion and onto the articles. The Globe and Mail has put out the one that I'm putting here. Alberta unveils their plan. This happened a week and a half ago. Ontario had already laid down their plan, which is really dumb. They're going to be 100% government store. The government store. And they're only looking at doing 200 stores province-wide. I feel sorry for everybody in Ontario. I call on everybody in Ontario to talk to their MPs. It's not too late to change that. The Maritimes came back out. They are following suit with Ontario with local stores that will be provided by the Canadian LPs, and only 2 of the LPs. So again, this is people doing each other favors. BC came out with a suggestion that people look at the framework that already exists. They didn't come out with their framework yet, but they hinted at the fact that they're likely going to let entrepreneurs and private businesses be a part of the future. And then Alberta came out. And this is Alberta's plan, and Alberta, I spoke about it separately in the video. I'm kind of proud of Alberta. What they did was they put out a feeler, a survey to everybody in Alberta and said, hey, speak up. And they had hundreds of thousands of responses. And so they have come out with a tentative plan that hints at a few things so they can ask for another plebiscite and get more of the feedback from Alberta. We have the NDP running Alberta. They're a little bit scared of not staying in power because Conservatives have been in power for 40 years here. So they really want to do what the majority of people say. So I will look for, as soon as the new survey comes out, just like the old one, I will share it. So their report comes back with quite a few differences from the regular, from what has come out. I'll read some of it. Alberta's detailed draft framework stands apart from what has been seen in New Brunswick, which announced that Crown Corporation will oversee the sale. Alberta Justice Minister Kathleen Gainley made a point Wednesday of mentioning that her province's plan differs from Ontario's in terms of where the drug can be consumed. Ontario proposes that recreational cannabis be limited to private homes. I didn't know that. What a dumb thing. Alberta, in contrast, is suggesting that people be able to use recreational marijuana both at home and in public areas where smoking's already allowed. The province still plans to ban consumptions at schools or hospitals, in vehicles, or in areas frequented by children. Cannabis won't be allowed within 5 meters of playgrounds, spray parks, sports fields, for instance. I'm not against any of that. Again, you know, they say recreational pot has to be kept out of hospitals. I get that. Medical pot will not be. Again, remember, this is a recreational legalization. They don't touch on the laws of medical cannabis yet. We won't have specialized cannabis cafes and lounges right away. It's something we will revisit in the future once the rules by the federal government for edible cannabis products are established. Retail sales will be another point of difference among the provinces. Alberta has opened the door, I'm smiling, to the possibility of dozens of private stores stretching out across the province in the years ahead. But unlike Ontario and BC, Alberta does not currently have a trove of private, technically illegal marijuana. We in Alberta, unlike BC, don't have a trove of dispensaries. We don't have dispensaries all over the place. I think there's one in Calgary. I've never been to it. There's two maybe in Edmonton, one in Red Deer. We've never grown that way because people in Alberta wait for the laws and try to live by the laws. But we are very driven by the private industry and free market. So the NDP knows this. They know that they will not be allowed to go forward with an Ontario plan. Not in Alberta. It won't be accepted. So what they've done is opened the door and said, okay, now that we've laid all this out, and they said that the age in Alberta will be 18, equal to our drinking age, 18. So I agree with that. Driving age is a bit too young, 16, even though I started much younger than that. And the rest, they're putting out to plebiscite again and saying, come on, you people, do you want to take part? How do you want it to look? Where do you want it to be? Do you want stores and restaurants? All that kind of stuff. So Alberta's doing a good job on building this. And that's the end of that story. That was a long story with a long talk. I think it was important. But we are now moving. We're still on the same wavelength. Hang on a second. Let's have a toke. Let's have red Congolese. I have that somewhere here. Yeah. Red Congolese. It's a sativa. It is a rosin. And I need the energy of the sativa because I slept a total of 2 hours last night. Peace and cheers. Oh, that is so sweet. I do love red Congolese, and it gives really good energy without giving the anxiety. I will, in a moment, also be dabbing some CBD, pure CBD, and that way I can bring the anxiety even further down. Next story is from marijuana.com, and it's a good story. That a new study out of BC recommends keeping unlicensed dispensaries opened. This is what I expected. BC's had a good history. University of British Columbia, Simon Fraser University, and a few other rather notable ones have been studying marijuana since the 80s. We've had a medical marijuana program since the 80s. So it isn't new for research to come out by the University of British Columbia, one of Canada's top 3 universities. This is one of those studies. Let me read some of this to you. Now, a research paper from UBC, University of BC, one of the top 3 universities in Canada, finds that most Canadians prefer dispensaries over any other way of buying cannabis. The study was part of the survey of medical marijuana patients in Canada to date. Part of the largest survey in Canada to date. This research paper focuses particularly on dispensaries, said Zach Walsh. Everyone is debating how to deal with the commercialization of cannabis. That's why we are publishing this now, because there haven't been any other studies that have actually asked dispensary customers why they like dispensaries. Dispensaries are there because people frequent them, because they make lots of money, because people want them. And not one study yet, except this one, has gone to the patients and said, why are you shopping there? The study was conducted by asking medical cannabis patients how they most like to get their medicinal marijuana and why. We looked at all the different modes of access, whether it's buying from a friend, growing your own, having a designated grower. We asked people on a number of dimensions how these things rated, and dispensaries did very well. They were the preferred method on most dimensions except cost for people who were growing themselves. Of course, cost for people growing themselves is very important because their costs are very minimal. Walsh stopped short of recommending dispensaries outright as an option, but did state that it's something that should be considered. What we do recommend is that when the government is looking at the regulations, they should consider the benefit of dispensaries, and we don't need to reinvent the wheel because we have a system that works well for selling cannabis. It's a great system. It does work well. My boys here are going to have a little bit of barking for a minute. Hang on a second. I'm sorry, I have no pause. I'm recording. Try to make it quick and quiet. Sorry about that. It'll quiet down. It'll quiet down in a second. I'm only on story 2. Walsh believes the reason the government and others should take note of UBC's findings that dispensaries are clearly what Canadians want. He added that the lawmakers would like a system that's sensitive to the preferences of consumers. Then dispensaries should be permitted to be in the retail mix. This is an important thing coming out just as the provinces are making decisions. And BC hinted that they would keep the same framework and just regulate it. Now we've got it. Now we've got UBC telling them that's a good idea. So this is a good plan. Let's move on to the next story because this is getting long. I promised you a good one. I hope you're getting it. The next story comes from Global News, and it's Justin Trudeau outlining the tax that he wants on cannabis. $1 tax on the first $10. So if you buy $1 of cannabis, it'll be $1 tax. If you buy $9 of cannabis, it'll be a $1 tax. And anything above $10, 10% for the federal government. This is preliminary. This probably will not fly because what the feds have done is allowed all the regulations to go to the provinces, but then the tax, He's keeping it all for himself. And that, even though he said, I'm going to supply the provinces with a bunch of money, he needs to supply the provinces, do a tax sharing thing. So that's what this story is about. I didn't get deep into it because I do believe it's very early. It's only a proposal. These things have to go through first and second reading. These things will not stay the same. Let's move on. It's just government crap. And for those of you who send me the stories, please keep sending them to me like crazy. I don't always bite on every story because, like I say about Jeff Sessions, I say this about this one and many things in Canada. When it's preliminary, it's so opinion that it's not worth bringing to you. I like to bring more facts. No fake news, only baked. Let's move on. The next story. And I said a dab of CBD. There's my little CBD pen. It's got about, I don't know, 5 mils of CBD in there. I take little tiny dabs. And there is nothing better than a CBD dab. That's the calming I need. Sometimes when I'm doing these things for all of you, I get very nervous. The next story is, I'm going to speak to it it's actually a good segue from what I just shared. I said I don't like to share a lot of preliminary policy proposals because they very often end up looking nothing like they originally did, and this makes my point. This story brought again by Global News, but it was all over the place. 1 meter plant high restriction dropped from the marijuana legalization bill during the reading in Parliament. It was debated rather hotly and quite succinctly that having a limit on the height of a plant not only was erroneous and made no sense, it created an absolutely horrible nightmare for regulators like the police, who once in a while are going to look at grow sites to make sure they're looked after properly and all that. Everyone's going to be allowed to grow 4 plants. Every single, they're going to be in everybody's backyards. For them to have to go look and say, oh, that one looks like it's 4 feet tall, and then arrest people for the height of a plant. So this one was dropped. It was dropped as it should be. I haven't highlighted anything except for I'm going to share this with you. It's a small story, but it really, the main reason NDP brought it forward was it was very difficult to enforce. Cultivators might break the law simply by providing fertilizer and water and going away for a week's vacation, and boom, they come back, it's 3.5 feet, they're arrested. It's dumb. It has no sense to it. I mean, who doesn't love meatballs? Slowly but surely, there is becoming more and more sense out there. And as I say that, this next story is the total lack of sense here in my own province. This brought from cbc.ca about a woman who traveled from Calgary, my town, to Edmonton, my old town, about a 3-4 hour bus ride by Greyhound bus. She was heading up and she was concerned about carrying her medical marijuana. So she went straight to the security guard and said, hey, by the way, I'm carrying my prescribed marijuana. It was in a proper, in fact, I think she was with Med Relief. It was in a proper container with all the prescription information on it. And the security guard said, she says, I talked to the security guard and he told me I wasn't allowed to take it because I didn't have a medical card. Now, let me first say, the rules of the ACMPR program changed from the MMPR that it replaced. ACMPR program allows the the LPs to decide how they can give a card that says this holder is legal to carry, or they can put labels that have all the prescription information, including doctor and expiry, on the label. Both are legal. Both are legal. He said, you don't have a card, you can't carry that. She tried to show him that everything that is needed is required there. It's quite a story. She ended up going to Edmonton without her anxiety medicine, and this is ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. One of you who follow me, I'm trying to remember, but I can't quite remember the name right now, is an Easterner who had the same sort of situation on a ferry where excuse me, where the security guards, that's the birch bark, where the security guards had no idea, so they talked to the local officials. They had no idea. Finally, they get to the RCMP, and the RCMP said, okay, this is not the case. And the police said they couldn't help. They had no idea. So this is a ridiculous story. There will be more of these as these laws continue to change. But shame on our cops, and shame on anybody who's in the transportation industry of people. People have to go with their medicine. If you don't know, research, get an answer. Get an answer. We shouldn't have to hide our medicine because we're afraid the person we're going to admit it to is too stupid to do what he has to do. And I had a really good story in here. It's come back. Medical marijuana, states with medical marijuana laws have lower rates of opioid-related deaths, a study finds. I have shared many of these. I'm just going to share a quote and move on. I've shared many of these. I can't share enough of them because the more people that can get off the opioids, off the opiates, off the SSRI inhibitors and all that kind of stuff, and get to a more relaxed life, the better. Less suicide, less trouble, less anxiety. So, a quote in this story brought to us from wakeupworld.com. Medical marijuana laws may have reduced hospitalizations related to opioid pain relievers, study author Yuyang Shi, a public health professor at University of California, told Reuters. This study and a few others provided some evidence regarding the potential positive benefits of legalizing marijuana to reduce opioid use and abuse. They're still preliminary. And it does go on to very often state how preliminary this is. We got to stop saying it's preliminary. This has been around for a long time. There's enough anecdotal evidence tied all together and makes a fact. And the last story, my friends, the last story, a little bit of CBD in my Como, a beautiful pen from Aovape. And no, I don't get paid for any of those shout outs. I shout out only those companies I really care for. And this story, I want to read this right away. The potential effects of cannabis on stress do appear to extend beyond the period of intoxication. This study goes on to say, well, let me read this. This is from Leafly. It's my final story of the day. The study, published in the medical journal Psychopharmacology, found that people who use cannabis daily, or almost daily, had a blunted stress reaction when exposed to high-stress situations after a period of abstinence from marijuana, while non-cannabis users reported feeling anxious and experienced elevated levels of the stress hormone cortisol when stressed. Chronic cannabis users reported lower levels of anxiety, and their cortisol levels remained the same under high stress as they were under no stress. This, again, preliminary studies finding relationships between anxiety and cannabis. And they're learning more, stuff that we already knew. You may get high for half an hour after toking. But the effects of the medicine, both on anxiety, on pain, on life in general, on mood, last for 2 to 3 hours and then slowly dissipate. So this is just the scientific community catching up with us, the heads. So, my friends, we are at the end. This is a wonderful day. It's a wonderful Sunday. I hope you're having a good day. I hope after watching this, you go out and you check out the mountains, because you know what? I'm going to take you on the drive with me. I'm going to take you up to the mountains, show you my new Jeep, show you where it goes and what it does, and we're going to have a little fun, and we're going to take you with. Peace and cheers, friends. Love and harmony. Find someone without a smile today. Give them one of yours. You can afford it. Much love.